If you're on Windows and talking to a SQL Server database, then SQL Server Management Studio is a great choice. But if you're on Linux or you want to talk to different kinds of databases, not just Microsoft SQL Server, then you need a different application. So one good application for doing this is a program called DataGrip. And it's made by a company called JetBrains, who does a lot of different integrated development environments. You might have used them already if you took some of the courses here. They make PyCharm and Android Studio, IntelliJ for Java, PHP Storm, WebStorm. So lots of different pretty good integrated development environments. And as I said, they have one for doing SQL development as well called DataGrip. So I'm going to walk you through the process of installing DataGrip on Linux, and then there's sort of a generic second video on some of the basic features of using DataGrip that will work on both Macintosh and Linux. So the first thing you want to do to get DataGrip is actually create a student account with JetBrains. So I'm just going to search for JetBrains student. And the first link here for students, free professional development tools or developer tools. And I agree. So they have a really good deal. They sell a lot of commercial products and they're fairly expensive. But as anyone with a pcc.edu email address can get a 1-year license to all of their products, and they have many of them, for free. And it's renewable for as long as you have a pcc.edu email address, and it's pretty straightforward to get it and to renew it. And basically all you have to do is go down on this page to this Apply Now. You'll fill in a form, create an account with a username and password, and then pretty quickly after that in the email you'll get approval and you'll be able to download their products. So go ahead and make an account. And then after you have the authorization, I'm going to go to a different tab and I'm going to search for DataGrip, download. And the first link is going to be this JetBrains DataGrip download, or it'll be somewhere in your list. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. There's installs for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. It knows that I'm on Linux already, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the download button. Okay, not too bad. So I'm going to open a terminal window. Actually, I already have one. And let me cd into my downloads folder, ls, and I'm going to start by extracting this DataGrip tar. So tar xfz DataGrip. And that created actually DataGrip 2018.2.2 folder. So cd there. Let's see what we have. And we have an install, a bin. I think I can just say ls bin. And if I say bin /datagrip.shell, that starts up DataGrip. So I'm not going to import custom settings, and you probably want to locate that somewhere a little more reasonable than your downloads folder. Exactly where you put it is going to depend on which version of Linux you're running and some other stuff. So I'm going to scroll to the end here to accept the license. Accept. I won't send usage statistics. And then here's where I activate my my DataGrip installation. And so I'm going to activate a license with my JetBrains account. That's the one you created in the previous step. So it's my email address and the password that I created when I set up the account, and activate. And that should be all you need for this year. So now I have a live copy. It'll take a minute to start up. So when first time you start it, you get to specify some customization. I'm mainly just going to take the defaults here. I'll use the standard IntelliJ theme. A lot of people like Darkula. And then I'll take the default editor color scheme. Now, for the language syntax, there's different flavors of SQL, and DataGrip gives you syntax highlighting and some other stuff. And depending on which databases you work with, you may want to just use generic SQL, or you might want to select one of these other ones. This is just a default setting that you can override for any particular project or any particular data source. Since this class we're going to be using Microsoft SQL Server, I'm just going to set the preferred dialect to SQL Server here, and I'll start using DataGrip. Okay, so when you start it up, you basically start up with this sort of empty thing here. And let me explain what we're doing. So DataGrip is an application that talks to databases. It's not a database itself. It's a database application that talks to databases. And the way it's structured is you have two things. You have a data source, which is basically configuration for how to connect to a database somewhere and information about the database. And then there's going to be a SQL file where you have SQL commands that get executed using the data source. So the first thing we want to do is create a data source. And if I open this database here, I'm going to have a little plus with a drop down, and I can add a new data source. And the type of data source I want is SQL Server. And we're going to configure a data source for a database that we're running at PCC. So PCC is running an instance of Microsoft SQL Server on a machine called cisdbss.pcc.edu. And so that's going to be the host here, cisdbss.pcc.edu. And then you can also specify a database, and this is handy for autocomplete. And so for demo, I'm just going to start with names, which is the name of one of the databases on cisdbss.pcc.edu. For the username in this class, we're going to use 275 student, all lowercase, no space. And then the password is exactly the same, 275 student. Now, the first time you run this, at the very bottom, you're going to see download missing driver files. This is a driver that DataGrip is going to use to connect to a specific type of database. And to download it, all you need to do is click that link, and it should automatically install what it needs. And if that goes away, then you're in good shape. So that should be everything. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I have to enter my password to unlock my login keyring. Okay, so let's try that. Good. So here's my new data source. And we'll look at that in a little more detail in the next video. But let's see if the connection's actually working. So the first thing, so this is like a console window I can type commands into, but I want to keep my SQL in a separate file. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, New, and then I want the Scratch file here. And let's say SQL Server, SQL. So now I have a scratch.sql file that I can type SQL commands into. I'm going to save that and rename it. So let's go ahead and hit Save As. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in, for now I'll just put it in my home directory, and I'll call it example.sql. And I'll say OK. Alright, so now I have a file in my home directory called example.sql, and I'm going to put some commands in it, SQL commands in it. So the first command is use names. And what that command does is it tells the connection that this thing is going to be associated with that I'm accessing this particular database. And then I'm also going to add a command, select top 50 star from all data semicolon. And we'll learn more about this statement next week. It's called a select statement. So this is a set of SQL commands that I can execute, but in order to execute them, I need to send them to this data source. And the way you associate this SQL file with this data source is by hitting this drop down here and selecting the data source. Now optionally, you can also switch this database. Actually, after it's connected, it'll be able to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead, and now that I have my data source selected, I'm going to hit this green arrow for run, execute. And then I have some choices. I can execute just the statement that's currently highlighted, or I can execute the whole thing. And these both basically do that. So I'm going to execute the whole thing. And what I get coming back is a grid that shows me the data from the all data table. So that means everything is working. I've made the round trip to the database and fetched some results. And I'll show you some more handy things you can do with DataGrip in the next video.